I draw the attention of honourable members to the passing of the Honourable Grant Tambling, AM, former Alderman of the Darwin City Council, Member of the Legislative Assembly representing the Fannie Bay electorate, Member of the House of Representatives, Senator and the Administrator of Norfolk Island. On behalf of honourable members, I extend a warm welcome to the family and friends of the Honourable Grant Tambling, AM. I remind honourable members that on completion of this debate, I will ask members to stand in silence for 1 minute as a mark of respect. I call the Chief Minister.
Madam Speaker, I move that this Assembly expresses its deep condolences to the family and friends of the Honourable Grant Tambling, AM. And Madam Speaker, tonight in the House we honour a proud Territorian, a leader, a statesman and a man of deep conviction. I'd like to send our thanks to the people in the gallery, the friends and the family, of course Sandy, the people who loved and cared about Grant very, very deeply. And last week, Madam Speaker, we were all at Grant's state funeral, an opportunity to honour his life in the highest possible way. And hundreds of Territorians filled that room, honouring his life, remembering his legacy and paying tribute to a great man. There's no question that Grant Tambling dedicated his life to serving the Northern Territory and Australia. He was a devoted husband to Sandy, a loving father to Corin and Amalia, and a cherished grandfather to Reuben, Hamish and Grace. His was a life of public service, but more importantly, he was focused on making a difference. And whether it was in the halls of Parliament, whether here or in Canberra, across our vast communities in the Northern Territory, or through the countless individuals whose lives he touched. He was more commonly known by his friends as Tambo and was born in 1943 in Wondiagh, Queensland, the eldest of 3 children. After his father's army service, the family permanently moved to the Northern Territory in 1946. He was a local lad, attending Darwin Primary School, Darwin High School, and later off to Adelaide Boys High School, matriculating in 1960. When Grant completed his studies, he worked and studied by correspondence for 4 years before moving to Sydney. While in Sydney, of course, though, he struck gold, Madam Speaker, meeting his beautiful, wonderful, the love of his life, Sandy, who was a young trainee nurse at the time. They wasted no time in getting married, Madam Speaker, and starting their beautiful family and their long life together. Grant's deep connection to the Territory remained strong, and he returned back here. That pull to the Territory was strong, where he came to work in Darwin, Arnhem Land and Gove. As he later put it, he continued in his career until Cyclone Tracy blew away all my clients in Darwin in December 1974, of course, with Cyclone Tracy. And Madam Speaker, his dedication to the Territory was evident very early on. He became increasingly active in community affairs and politics, starting with his role as an alderman on the City of Darwin Council from 1972 to 1974. But that just, he was bitten by the bug, Madam Speaker. He just realised he had more and more to give. And so in 1974, he ran for the Country Liberal Party and was elected to the first fully elected Northern Territory Legislative Assembly, representing the seat of Fannie Bay until 1977. Madam Speaker, within months of that government, though, of course, Cyclone Tracy struck. His involvement in its aftermath highlighted his dedication to rebuilding and advancing the Territory at one of our darkest hours. He was, of course, a foundational member of the Country Liberal Party and instrumental in shaping the Territory's political landscape. And I think all of us had the benefit of sitting down and speaking with Grant over the years, his wisdom, his kindness, his patience with us. And I've certainly enjoyed many a conversation and many an opportunity to spend time with Grant. He was the Deputy Leader of the Northern Territory Majority Party, which was the fledgling CLP from 1975 to 1977. He was fiercely passionate about statehood, economic development and regional advancement, which defined his career in politics, championing those issues. Madam Speaker, in 1980, Grant was then elected as the federal member for the Northern Territory in the House of Representatives, and off he was, getting frozen half to death in Canberra. A bit of a change from here, Madam Speaker. The national stage, though, really helped to shape his key political interests around Aboriginal advancement, again, statehood, a major issue, defence and stronger ties with Southeast Asia, particularly Indonesia. In 1987, he returned to federal politics as the Senator for the Northern Territory, serving Territorians in the Australian Parliament until 2001. In his first speech to the Senate, Grant declared, "I will never be apologetic about being parochial in my advocacy for the Northern Territory." Madam Speaker, Grant championed major infrastructure projects, including the Alice Springs to Darwin Railway. He supported the expansion of mining and defence industries and remained a tireless advocate for the Territory's rights and, of course, for self-government. His work in Indigenous affairs was both significant and, at times, controversial. He pushed for accountability in government spending while also fighting for meaningful progress in Indigenous education, health and employment. Grant was also a principled politician, willing to stand firm on what he believed, Madam Speaker. He opposed the override of the Northern Territory's voluntary euthanasia legislation, arguing that it was an undemocratic infringement on Territory rights. Madam Speaker, Grant was a vocal supporter of the Northern Territory's push for statehood. But beyond politics and beyond the policies and beyond the debates, he was a man of great character. He had a love for the world beyond politics, which for some might be hard to believe. He was an explorer at heart, with a passion for gardening, for drama, and he loved reading. Madam Speaker, for many of us here today, Grant was much more than a leader. And as I said earlier, he was a mentor to many, a colleague and a friend. Beyond politics, he remained deeply involved in community life. After retiring from the Senate, he took on various advisory roles, chaired reviews on public policy, and served as Administrator of Norfolk Island from 2003 and 2007. And I think in the eulogies last week we heard of Grant's time as Administrator, the impact him and Sandy made during their time in that role in such a small foreign community, really, compared to the Northern Territory, making such a huge difference in the lives of those people. In 2011, Grant was appointed a member of the Order of Australia for his service to the Parliament of Australia, to the community of Norfolk Island and to the Northern Territory through his contributions at all levels of government. And of course, he remains as the only member or only person in the country to have ever served in all three levels of government, which is truly unbelievably remarkable. I often wonder if he questioned his life choices at any point, Sandy. He took that with him. We'll never know, perhaps. We'll never know. Madam Speaker, Grant courageously battled with illness over the past several years. With Sandy, you were by his side that entire time, providing so much love and care and support, and your patience and dedication was truly remarkable, and it was witnessed by all of us. It's an absolute credit to your love and commitment to your marriage and to each other as undoubtedly best friends. Grant Tambling passed away at the age of 81, leaving behind a legacy of leadership and of service. Above all, he was an amazing husband and a devoted family man. To you, Sandy, and to your beautiful children and your grandchildren, we offer our deepest and most sincere, heartfelt condolences. Madam Speaker, tonight we honour a proud Territorian who gave so much to this place and to its people. To you, Grant, we thank you. We offer you our deepest gratitude, and we honour you with the state funeral and with tonight's condolence motion to recognise your contribution to the Northern Territory in the past and indeed forever. Let us all continue his work by striving for a stronger and fairer Northern Territory for everyone. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm honoured to stand here this evening alongside my parliamentary colleagues to honour the life and legacy of Mr Grant Tambling. On behalf of my Labor opposition team and I, we offer our deepest condolences to the family of Mr Tambling, to his friends, his former colleagues, and indeed all Territorians who had the privilege of knowing him. Madam Speaker, Mr Tambling wasn't just a politician. He was a dedicated Territorian, a strong advocate and above all, a man who cared deeply about his community. Grant's journey in the public life began as an alderman in 1972, and his career took him to these sacred halls, and then from the Northern Territory halls, Madam Speaker, to the politics of the federal stage as a senator until 2001. He was never one to shy away from what I understand, Madam Speaker, from a complex challenge, and he fought hard for what he believed in. For over 40 years, Madam Speaker, Mr Tambling dedicated himself to improving Aboriginal affairs here in the Northern Territory and pushing for better outcomes and ensuring that Indigenous voices were heard and indeed respected. Mr Tambling's legacy in this space is something that will live for many generations, and we thank him for that legacy. Grant's story started in Kingaroy, Queensland, but his heart belonged to the Territory. After moving to Darwin as a child, he attended Darwin Primary School, Darwin High School, and later, as we've heard, Adelaide Boys High. He was a bright and determined young man, from what I understand, Madam Speaker, someone who understood the value of hard work from a very early age. He carried that work ethic into his career at AMP, first in Sydney and later in Darwin, Arnhem Land, Gove, and when he further developed his deep passion for Aboriginal affairs, which cemented his values in that area. When Mr Tambling entered the Northern Territory Parliament in 1974, winning the seat of Fannie Bay, he quickly made his mark. As Deputy Leader of the Country Liberal Party, he held key portfolios like community development, finance and local government. But beyond the titles and beyond the responsibilities, Mr Tambling was always focused on making a real difference for his community. His hard work laid the foundation for progress in statehood, defence, territory economic development, and particularly in building relationships with our Southeast Asian neighbours. Although Mr Tambling's time in the NT Parliament lasted just one term, he left with his head held high. His beliefs and values never wavered, despite any party politics, and he stood firm on Aboriginal advancement for the rights of Territorians and ensuring that the Northern Territory had a strong voice in those national discussions about us. Madam Speaker, Mr Tambling's work continued in the federal arena, where he played a pivotal role in shaping the future of the Northern Territory. Grant was never one to simply follow the crowd. He had the courage to stand up for what he believed in, even if it meant going against his own party. In the mid-1990s, Madam Speaker, he opposed the Liberal Party's private members' bill that sought to override the Northern Territory's euthanasia legislation, fighting for the Territory's right to self-determination. Mr Tambling also crossed the floor in 1981 to support an amendment to the Airlines Agreement Bill, a move that demonstrated his strong independent streak and a deep commitment to fairness and opportunity for all Territorians. Beyond politics, Grant was a man of principle, a man of integrity, a man who genuinely cared about the people that he represented and that he impacted on. His work in securing investment for the Northern Territory, supporting major projects like the Alice Springs to Darwin Railway and the expansion of our mining industry, reflected his vision for a stronger and more prosperous Territory. Madam Speaker, we take the moment today to remember Mr Grant Tambling for not just what he did, but for who he was. He was a fighter, a leader, a mentor, and a friend to many. He was someone who left the Territory in a better place than when he found it. And while we mourn his passing, we also celebrate his life and his many contributions to our Northern Territory community. Rest in peace, Mr Tambling. Your legacy will be remembered.
Member for Casuarina.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise today to pay my tribute to a true Territorian and remarkable Australian, the Honourable Grant Ernest John Tambling, AM. Many in this chamber and across the Northern Territory knew him simply as the Tambo, and while titles like Senator, Member, Administrator, alderman, honorable might be written next to his name. The truth is, he earned every single one of them because Grant Tambling was more than just a politician. He was a public servant in the truest sense of the word, a man who dedicated his entire life to serving the people of the Northern Territory and Australia. Born in 1943 in a small Queensland town called Wanguri, Grant was eldest of the 3 children, but it was in Darwin that he grew up, where he lived, studied, worked, and built a life grounded in service. His father, Tam Tambling, was a much-loved teacher in the territory, affectionately known as a swaggy teacher, who called the tracks down to Catherine, educating children in the bush. His mother was also a teacher who moved to Darwin in 1938. So in many ways, service to community ran in Grant's blood. Madam Speaker, after the war, the Tambling family returned to Darwin, and young Grant completed high school here before moving to Adelaide for senior schooling. He didn't come from privilege. He worked hard, studied by correspondence, and understood the value of the opportunity of education and of earning your way. Madam Speaker, Grant's political career is nothing sort of extraordinary. He is believed to be the first Australian to have served in all 3 levels of government. That tells us something, not just about his capability, but about the trust people had in him at every stage of his life. Madam Speaker, he served as an alderman on Darwin City of Council from 1972 to 1974. Then in 1974, he was elected as a member for Fannie Bay in the very first Northern Territory Legislative Assembly. He was a part of the founding class, the first team building the framework for self-government in NT. That's the history making. In 1980s, he was elected to the House of Representatives as a member for the Northern Territory. Then again in 1987, he returned to federal politics as a senator, serving right up until 2001. For nearly 2 decades, he was loud and proud voice for Territorians in Canberra. I want to share something he said in his maiden speech to the Senate, because I think it tells us everything we need to know about Grant Tambling's character. Madam Speaker, he said, "I will never be apologetic about being parochial in my advocacy for the Northern Territory." Now that's the man who knew he was and what he stood for. He was never afraid of fight for the territory, to speak up for the people who live here, and to push for things many others wouldn't touch. He believed in the territory. He believed we weren't second-class Australians, and he made it his mission to push for all statehood. He believed that Territorians deserve the same rights, same responsibilities, and same opportunities as everyone else in this country. He wasn't afraid to tackle the big issues. He spoke strongly on euthanasia, on self-governance, on Aboriginal rights and development. He pushed for the better infrastructure, better access to education and health, and stronger defence presence in North. And even toward the end of his career, he was still pushing, still thinking about what's next. He spoke about the need to improve Aboriginal health and education, about the tax reform for people in remote areas, about the defense, investment, and even a space based on our Indian Ocean territories. But what I admire most, Madam Speaker, is that Grant Tambling had the humility to reflect. In one of his final speeches in Senate, he stood up and said sorry, personally and publicly, to Aboriginal Territorians. He said, "So I say sorry. I say sorry very fundamentally for the things that I have not accelerated fast enough. I did not get enough done, and I hope that others will pick up many of those important programs." Madam Speaker, those words stick with me because in politics, it is easy to talk about what you achieved. It is rare for someone to acknowledge what's still unfinished. That's courage. That's honesty. That's leadership. Madam Speaker, out of politics, Grant continued his service to Australia as the administrator of Norfolk Island from 2003 to 2007. And even after all that, he returned to the territory, the place he loved most. In 2011, he was appointed a member of Order of Australia, AM, for his service to politics and the community. That honor was well earned. Madam Speaker, I know we use the word legacy a lot when we speak about people who have passed. But with the Grant Tambling, it truly applies. His work helped shape the Northern Territory as we know it today. He paved the way of a generation of leaders who now stand where he once stood. He inspired the people to care about the territory, to believe in it, and to fight for its future. To his wife, Sandy, his children, his grandchildren, and everyone who knew and loved him, on behalf of my colleagues and the people of the Northern Territory, I say thank you. Thank you for sharing him with us. Thank you for supporting him so he could serve. And thank you for standing beside him as he gave so much of himself to others. Grant Tambling was a fighter, a builder, a thinker, and a Territorian to the core. We honor his memory and we carry forward his vision for a stronger, fairer, and more united Northern Territory. May he rest in peace.
Member for Wanguri.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to extend my condolences to the family of the late Honourable Grant Tambling AM, who was born on the 20th of June 1943 and recently passed away earlier this year on the 24th of January 2025. Madam Speaker, Grant was born to Ernest Tambling and Edna Nee Williamson, both school teachers. Ernest Tambling, who came to the Territory in 1925 as a teacher for a year, but ended up staying for 45 years. Grant's father, Ernest, was known as the swagman teacher by moving around in isolated communities in the top end, bringing education to children. He later taught at the Darwin School and for a time after World War II worked in the NT administration before returning to school, teaching as the head teacher at Bagot. Madam Speaker, I share that quick insight to showcase the long-term relationship the Tambling family have had with the Territory and their dedication to Territorians. Madam Speaker, because of this service in education by Grant Tambling's father, Ernest, the street bordering my electorate of Wanguri and the electorate of Casuarina is named Tambling Terrace to honour that service to the Territory. Madam Speaker, Grant himself was educated here at Darwin Primary and Darwin High and completed his education in Adelaide. When Grant returned to Darwin, he similarly, like myself, came to work in the financial services industry, selling insurance for AMP in Darwin, and like his father, travelled the Territory to remote areas and looked after the Greater Darwin region, Arnhem Land and Gove for many years. Madam Speaker, Grant would have used this time to understand the needs of the community and see him moving into politics to advocate for the community at a government level. He first served as an alderman and then moved into the first Legislative Assembly for the Northern Territory as the member for Fannie Bay in 1974. Madam Speaker, as we know, with Cyclone Tracy decimating Darwin in 1974, Grant was the Commissioner of the Darwin Reconstruction Commission between 1975 and 1978, which the Commission was tasked to oversee the rebuilding of more than 2,500 homes, and they did this in 3 years. With distance from the rest of the country, this was an amazing feat. Madam Speaker, the Darwin-affected families during that time would have appreciated in having a commissioner who understood the work involved because of his passion for Territorians. Madam Speaker, my colleagues in this chamber have highlighted all the great things Grant did at all levels of government, including being the administrator of the Norfolk Island. But what I want to say is thank you to Grant and his family. Thank you for your service, as many of us who decide to run to represent our constituents only ever look at one level, but Grant did it all. He believed he could make a difference, and he did it at all levels, local, state and federal. Madam Speaker, I wish to extend my gratitude to his family, where Grant is survived by his beautiful wife Sandra, known to many as Sandy, children Corinne and Amalia, and grandchildren Reuben, Hamish and Castilia. Grant and Sandy were married for nearly 56 years, which for most couples never get to achieve it. And it is clear at the state funeral last week, in his honour, we heard from many speakers the love and support they had for each other and combined dedication to the Territory. It was through his family who supported Grant so that he could do his best for all Territorians. I recall Corinne saying the family had to watch every news channel so that his dad was across all the issues of the day. Madam Speaker, I wish to extend my deepest condolences to Grant Tambling's family and the heartfelt thanks for lending your husband, father and grandfather so that Territorians had a voice at the table. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Fannie Bay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I would like to rise today to pay tribute to the Honourable Grant Ernest John Tambling AM, who passed away on the 24th of January 2025. Whilst I didn't have the opportunity to get to know Grant personally, as we've heard today, we all know and acknowledge that he was a dedicated man of service who made significant contributions to the Northern Territory and Australia throughout his long career. But Grant was also a husband, a father, a grandfather, and a friend to many. And from what people have told me, Grant was known by all that met him as an absolute gentleman. He served as the member for Fannie Bay in the first Northern Territory Legislative Assembly from 1974 through to 1977, paving the way for those who followed in his footsteps, including me. Grant's achievements demonstrate his lifelong commitment to the development and governance of the Northern Territory, for which he continued to advocate for throughout his later political career. As the current member for Fannie Bay, I am honoured to continue the legacy of service that Grant Tambling began in this electorate. His commitment to our community and his tireless advocacy for the Northern Territory serves as an inspiration to all of us in public office. Grant Tambling's passion for the development and progress of the Northern Territory was evident throughout his career. He held executive responsibilities for community development, finance and local government during his time here in the Legislative Assembly. His work laid the foundation for the growth and prosperity we see in Fannie Bay and across the Territory. As we remember Grant Tambling's contributions to his family, I pledge to carry forward his spirit of dedication to our community, and I will do this by working tirelessly to ensure that Fannie Bay remains safe, secure, and that it thrives. Grant's legacy reminds us of the impact that one person can have on their community and their nation. As the member for Fannie Bay, I'm sure Grant, and as I am sure that Grant would have, I will continue to remain engaged in community services and focus on issues that are important to Territorians. Grant was known for his fierce advocacy and willingness to challenge ideology. He was a strong advocate for all of his constituents and for the Territory as a whole. I'm sure that I speak on behalf of everybody in the chamber today when I say that we sincerely thank Grant Tambling for his service, and even more so, we thank his family for giving him to the NT and allowing him to do what he loved. The NT is a better place for having Grant Tambling as a part of its history. Madam Speaker, I would like to place on the record my appreciation of Grant's long and meritorious public service and tender my profound sympathy to his family in their bereavement. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Fong Lim.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you to everyone in the House for the opportunity to speak tonight, and thank you also to everybody in the gallery who's joining us tonight for the opportunity to share in this occasion. I also rise to speak in memory of Grant Tambling AM. Now, as we've heard around the House, Grant served as an alderman with Darwin City Council from 72 to 74 before being elected to Fannie Bay, to the First Territory Assembly from 74 to 77, and then became the deputy leader of the CLP for 2 years as well, before moving to the House of Representatives for 4 years, and then again to Canberra in 1987 till 2001 as a senator. And he obviously served in all 4 levels of government, plus as an administrator of Norfolk Island between 2003 and 2007. Goodness me. I rise tonight, though, to not detail his long list of services and offices. Others have already done so exhaustively. I'll spare us another one of those. I rise to speak to provide a couple of brief personal reflections because I had the opportunity to know him a little bit over time, and I just want to draw on 2 things, really. 1, his generosity, and 2, his intellectual depth. Now, politicians are busy people, and in the time that Grant served, he was often representing even more constituents than some of all of us with smaller, larger numbers of people to represent. But he always made time for others. And that's a common refrain that I found. He made time for others. He made time to go out bush. He made time to be in the city. He made time. And indeed, he made time for me as well. He helped me enormously with some of my early career research. I can remember visiting he and Sandy in their apartment in the Sentinel building, and I can remember interviewing him on the balcony many times over for the first major piece of research I was able to do about welfare reform in North Australia. And it was something that he was very passionate about as well, because he was a parliamentary secretary involved in that area for an awfully long time. And, you know, the depth of his knowledge was profound, and he was always extremely generous with being able to share his insights and also his connections, which I would add were really helpful when I needed interviews with people who otherwise wouldn't open doors for me. Now, he was, of course, generous in that regard and a loyal CLP stalwart for a number of years, for decades in fact. Nevertheless, it is worth remembering as well that he was genuinely committed to bipartisan cooperation for the benefit of Territorians in a way that few Territory representatives have been, and he's to be commended for that. And I was reminded of this fact by Sandy herself, actually, just the other day. She kindly graced me at an International Women's Day event, and we were talking about the fact that that Grant took the time to get out and about in the bush, and it teased out the idea that actually partly that happened because he and some of his colleagues fought for better terms and conditions to be able to represent the Northern Territory. And so I wanted to take Sandy up on that point, and I hunted down former Senator Trish Crossan, who crossed over with Grant Tambling for a term as well, to get some of her reflections to find out how much of that was real. And I'm grateful to Senator Crossan, former Senator Crossan, for sharing some generous reflections in that regard. And she pointed out that by the time that she had gotten to the Senate, Grant was a real stalwart. He'd been there for a long period of time, and he was a senior figure. And despite all of that, he was extremely generous in offering counsel and guidance to somebody from the opposing party, no less in Canberra, because they shared a common interest, as he said, in fighting the Territory's corner. And down in Canberra, it was, the two of them against the rest of them, as he saw it. He used to maintain a spreadsheet, I was told by Senator Crossan, of issues relevant to the Territory across all of the federal portfolios. And can you imagine if you're new into the Senate and relatively clueless and have been parachuted in, having to come in and try and be across all of that? And he used to share that information, Senator Crossan said, so that they could champion ideas. Even sometimes when they weren't ideas he could champion, he would feed them off to her so that she could do something with it. So he was a very skillful politician in that regard. And again, speaking to that remote engagement, they worked together on some really practical nuts and bolts stuff, like vehicle access to be able to get out bush and work the city. And so in the background, they, I note today our Chief Minister had to fight our corner of the Remuneration Tribunal, and they did the same thing in Canberra to try and get some of their air charter entitlement turned into vehicle allowance so that they could actually get out bush more often. So it was a time of bipartisan cooperation in the background. Senator Crossan shared as well that he did extensive work on copyright vis-a-vis Indigenous art. And again, that was research that was shared and continues to affect our landscape to this day. One of her final observations was in relation to her own maiden speech. At the end of it, Senator Tambling came over and said, "It was a great speech, well done, but just quietly, you might have said something about the Catherine floods." And Senator Crossan at the time didn't really know what to make of it. And then she got advice from Senator Tambling at the time saying that, listen, you can still make up for it by speaking about it in a special adjournment, to which she was querying what a special adjournment was. So, he was extremely generous across the board in that regard, and I think it's something worth reflecting on. They got into a bit of trouble. They even had such a collegiate relationship down there. There are some incidences of them alternating images of one another stuck to one side of the House or the other side of the House, trying to goad each other into voting for things that they were not allowed to vote for. Perhaps it's a tactic we should start employing around here. Her key observation at the end of it all was that Grant Tambling, quote unquote, never played the person, only the ball. I think that's a testament to his character. The second thing I wanted to reflect on tonight was his depth. Now, politicians are increasingly lightweight in the modern era in committing their ideas to paper. It's just too difficult, it's too risky, you get caught out. Now, Grant Tambling was somebody who didn't shy away from putting his thoughts out there in the public domain to be tested. And I was the beneficiary of some of his work, and I dug out a couple of things that he gave me that, honestly, I'm still referring to this day. Again, in his capacity as Shadow Minister for Regional Development for External Territories in North Australia, he wrote discussion papers that tackled big issues like social security and welfare and poverty in North Australia. These are reports from the 1990s. And it's interesting, some of the things that they go through are so pertinent to us still today that there's lots to be learnt. There's wisdom to be gained from these documents that he and his staff and his office worked on. They engage with tax reform, the Commonwealth's Grants Commission models and whether they're fair, contributors to the poverty, the high cost of service delivery in the Northern Territory, remote tax allowances, own tax allowances, and even truancy and non-attendance at schools. Issues concerning Aboriginal people and Aboriginal poverty were also forefront in his mind, and he didn't shy away from committing his thoughts and his ideas to paper. He was a man of conviction in that regard. Probably my favourite bit of his that I have, though, is from this discussion paper from what used to be called the North Australian Research Unit, based at the Australian National University. And this is from 1998, discussion paper 11. And it's called A Social Policy Research Agenda to Take the Territory and the nation into the 21st century. And there's a comprehensive paper that's written in here, which is really worth reflecting on when we think about some of the things that we do in this House, because if we're not mindful of what people have done in the past, we're doomed to repeat mistakes. There are just a couple of quotes that I want to draw out of there because I think they're really worth mentioning. The first is the following. The unique characteristics of the Northern Territory with high Aboriginal and ethnic population components demand constant testing of needs and equity matters. We're still fighting that fight all this time later, and I think it's worth remembering that we stand on the shoulders of giants in building some of these arguments in order to prosecute our arguments better with the federal government. All the more worth remembering on a night when the federal budget will be released. A second quote that I drew out of this paper that I really like is, in his opinion, quote unquote, it is our role as politicians, as with academics, policy advisors, bureaucrats and leaders, to ensure that we develop social policy that is adaptable and flexible enough to meet the demands of our changing world and region. We must address the needs of all of our policies and in doing so, ensure effective and efficient service delivery. A final quote that I want to draw out of here, I'll read verbatim from here and try not to make a mess of, regarding the gravity of his role. I do not take lightly my responsibility as a federal senator. It saddens me to see the politics of division that is being practiced by the One Nation Party. Pauline Hanson and her advisors are showing a total lack of social responsibility by promoting return to economic and social policies which would see Australia quickly attain the status of a world pariah and make the prospect of Paul Keating's Banana Republic look positively cheery. Madam Speaker, Grant Tambling was a heavyweight. More than just being a skillful politician, he was a true parliamentarian, and he was a servant of the public in the truest sense. He was a man of principle, he was a man of conviction, and he was a man of sincere dedication to the Northern Territory. I offer my sincere condolences to Sandy and Corin and Amalia and Reuben and Hamish and Castiella. Verily to God we belong, and to him we shall return. Vale, Grant Tambling.
I would also like to extend my deepest condolences to the family and friends of the Honourable Grant Tambling. The question is that the condolence motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye, to the contrary no. I think the ayes have it. I ask members to stand and observe 1 minute's silence. I thank honourable members for their contributions to the motion this evening. There are light refreshments available in the main hall for the family and friends of Mr Tambling. Thank you for attending this evening. Please be seated.